Hello art lovers and welcome back to my studio. Today's illustration will be of Persephone. Now, the most famous myth about Persephone is the story of her abduction. As an empowered female myself, this story never really sat well with me. I've always loved Greek mythology, but more often than not, it seems that the women in these stories were made out to be victims or villains. And let's not forget the not-so-subtle rapey undertones of nearly all of Zeus's escapades. After all, Persephone is a goddess, and I'd like to believe much more powerful than a helpless child. I'm not sure why so many myths painted women this way, but I seek to change it. So I'm revamping this story to suit a more modern frame of mind, with one caveat regarding the age/relation of these characters. For all of you mythology fans out there, yes, Hades would still technically be Persephone's uncle. There's not really a good way around this without rewriting a whole lot of backstory, and this video is only 15 minutes. Apparently, when you're a god, the only way to keep immortality in your bloodline is to quite literally keep it in the family. I don't make the rules, I'm just rewriting the story. Also, if this helps at all, try thinking of it along the lines of Vampire Rules, or if you're into chick flicks, Age of Adeline. When you're 1,000 years old and you've stopped aging around your mid to late 20s, dating a guy who's a couple hundred years older than you isn't that big of a deal. Age literally means nothing when you're both immortal. But I'm actually getting a little ahead of myself because first I want to talk about the long process of making this piece. Because this is a goddess painting, I knew I wanted to go large, so this piece is actually 12 inches by 16 inches. And if you're familiar with my collection, you know that the only other one comparable in size is my Aura Quartz painting. Again, big goddess, big painting. As many of you know, I am a big Disney fan, so part of my research for this painting was watching Disney's Hercules a couple hundred times, and in doing so, I noticed a couple of techniques that I wanted to implement into this painting. The first of these being colored line art. And I'm not really sure how I hadn't noticed this before, but Disney does this a lot in their artwork. I think the fact that I've begun analyzing my own style a little bit more, it has actually caused me to look deeper at the artwork that I enjoy and really figure out what it is about those pieces that speaks to me. So for my line art, I used Rowney's acrylic inks as well as Micron pens in black and green. Both are light fast and water resistant, so they work really well with professional watercolors. The next technique that I wanted to try doesn't actually happen until much later on in the video, almost near the end. It's the glowing effect that you see amongst all the gods and goddesses to represent their immortality and power in contrast to the humans. I really loved this look, but I struggled a little bit with how to create the effect considering I was trying to recreate a digital effect with traditional mediums. Now, my go-to style, which I often have to remind myself not to do in every single painting, is one in which the light source is coming from directly in front of the character, so the center of the face is usually the brightest and the sides are where you would find shadow. But this technique called for me to do it completely opposite, making the sides of the figure brighter and the center of the face and body darkest, which is objectively not all that difficult, but for whatever reason my hand kept doing one thing and my brain was doing something else, and I just kept stopping and pausing and staring at it, and it just looked so wrong to me. Another issue that I was running into was the paper was not absorbing the water in a way that I was used to. Instead of allowing the water to sit on the surface while I spread it, it was absorbing immediately. And then I would have a solid saturated spot of color, and when I would try to blend it out, it would be a completely different tone. I'm not sure if this is because I started off working on an easel, but every time I laid down a little bit of wash, I would have a panic attack. Now, since I was so stressed out, I decided to just stop, take a couple of days, give myself a break, because the next part is where I feel weakest, and that's painting flowers, and I didn't want to go into that with such a high stress level. And doing this really simple thing is what helped me stop and realize that even though the washes were going on really splotchy, which you will see a lot better when I paint the flowers, they were drying really flat, so I just needed to be patient and let the paint do what it needed to do. Another thing that helped was to go in and do a digital color test, so that way instead of going in stressed and unsure, I felt like I had a more solid plan. Okay, now we're about halfway through this video and I've still got a story to share. So let's begin the modern myth of Persephone. Being the only daughter of Zeus and Demeter, Persephone was truly a sight to behold as she grew to become a powerful and benevolent goddess of nature, fertility, and spring. She could often be found under the watchful eye of her mother as they tended to the fields of trees and wheat to feed their many human subjects. But after hundreds of years of ritual, Persephone longed for change and excitement. Hades, god of the underworld and keeper of souls, was a very powerful but shy deity. Humans and immortals alike viewed him as a depraved demon, and after hundreds of years of ridicule, it just became easier to be alone. With thousands of new souls to look after each passing day, there was very little time to socialize anyway. So each resigned themselves to an eternity of maintaining their realms and caring for their subjects, yet both felt unbearably alone and unfulfilled. On the rare occasion which he left the underworld, Hades traveled above his realm to admire the sweet Persephone from afar. He knew that his siblings Demeter and Zeus would never approve of the god of the dark underworld courting their golden spring daughter. He wouldn't even know what to say to her if they did. One day, as Persephone was gathering flowers in a meadow with her maidens, she wandered apart from the group, ensnared by the blooming of glorious white and gold flowers beside a pond. Hades watched from the far side of the pond as she approached one of the flowers rhythmically glowing amongst the others. It was as though it held a thrumming heartbeat within its petals. With each beat, the flower grew brighter, and the bewitched Persephone came closer and closer to grasping it in her hand. At that very moment, Hades recognized the cursed flower, and he knew that once she touched it, she would become transfixed and doomed to spend the rest of eternity gazing at her own reflection as she melted away into the same narcissus flower. Panicked at the idea that he could lose the goddess he had grown to love from afar, Hades knew he had to act. So before the moment her fingertips touched the glowing petals, Hades opened a great crater beneath her feet, and Persephone fell into the deep darkness. Needless to say, Demeter was very displeased when she found out from the frantic handmaidens that Hades had stolen her daughter away. Feeling hurt and betrayed by her kin, she wandered aimlessly in search of the now sealed void that swallowed Persephone whole. Being a true goddess of agriculture and harvest, Demeter was so distraught over the loss of her child that the earth became a cold and barren place. Living things stopped growing, and people began to die of famine. Persephone had fallen so far and deep that when Hades caught her in the underworld, she was fast asleep. He was certain that she would be horrified to find herself in such a place. Hades carried her to the gates of the underworld, where the monstrous Cerberus stood guard. He bid his loyal hound to watch over her from the shadows, so that when she awoke, she would only see the light of her exit and never be scarred by the horrors of his realm. As he lay her down on the warm marble, a bed of spring leaves and flower buds grew to meet her. He waited there just a moment as she slept to appreciate their closeness. As he reached out to touch her cheek for the first and final time, Persephone stirred from her slumber, and Hades vanished into the shadows. Persephone arose with a yawn, thinking she really should gather such beautiful flowers to give to her mother. But as she looked around at the dark marble cavern, Persephone realized she was no longer in the meadow. At one end of the cavern, she could see a bright light, and she knew she should walk towards it. But behind her, in the darkness, she could sense something that made her turn away from the light. As she walked deeper into the cavern, Persephone began to hear a low and echoing growl. And just before she stepped into complete darkness, she heard a deep voice whisper, "Wait," from the far wall. Persephone smiled softly and continued forward into the blackness without hesitation. Hades revealed himself, and looks of fear, surprise, and delight rolled over his face as Persephone emerged from the shadows, holding a three-headed puppy in her arms. "What have you done to my great beast?" Hades asked. As she scruffed the wriggling puppy's fur, Persephone replied, "Well, hello, Hades." "Hello. I am a goddess of spring, as I'm sure you well know. All creatures touched by my power become youthful and joyous, and filled with energy. And as I'm sure you well know, Cerberus is the guardian to the gates of the underworld. I haven't seen him this size in a millennia. How do you presume he'll keep mischievous souls from escaping in this form?" "I don't presume. You do. At least one of these heads is female." Persephone placed Cerberus down and watched as they scampered off into the Hall of Hades. As she looked up at the cavern ceiling, a stream of vines gracefully flowed down and wrapped themselves around the gates of the underworld. "My vines should keep the weary souls at bay, at least until your monstrous beast is feeling yourself again, and it will give you time to show me around." "Show you around? Do you not fear me? Do you not fear the horrors this place could hold?" As Persephone began to slowly circle Hades, she said, "And why should I fear you? Are you my enemy, Hades?" "Why, no, of course not, but am I not as much goddess as you are god?" "Yes, of course, I meant no disrespect. I've heard Zeus's stories about how he tricked his brothers into making him supreme god of the gods, sending one to the depths of the ocean and the other to the depths of the underworld. With each retelling, he makes himself more clever. He makes Poseidon more dim-witted, and you more depraved." "My brother is no dimwit." "Oh, I know. Poseidon shows his subjects and the other gods day after day that he is worthy of respect and honor. But I have never seen you on Mount Olympus. And imagine my surprise to find the dark ruler of the underworld is actually very kind and gentle." "I am not so gentle, but neither am I the monster that Zeus makes me out to be." "Well then, Hades, why don't you show me who you really are, and what wonders this place really holds?" With a soft smile and nod, Hades said, "As you wish." He reached out a guiding hand, which Persephone took in hers as they walked deeper into the blackness together. "You are not what I expected," the smiling Persephone replied. "I find that very few beings are." Now, since this painting is just about done, I'll actually have to stop here. But don't worry, I won't leave you totally hanging. For this one, I'll be making a special set of limited edition prints. Each print will be a 5x7 story card, but think birthday card, not playing card. On the front, you'll find the full color print, and on the inside of the card will be my rendition of Persephone's story from beginning to end. Lastly, the back of the card will be signed, dated, and numbered, and I'll be sure to leave enough space for you to write your own personal message, just in case you want to give this piece as a gift. For the time being, these prints will be available for pre-order only. I'm thinking I'll probably do somewhere between 25 and 50 prints, but I'll have a better idea once I know just how many of you are actually interested in getting this one. And with that, I just want to remind you all to embrace your contradictions. Persephone was the goddess of spring, and she chose to be the queen of the underworld. You don't need to fall in line with any of the assumptions that society is placing on you. As always, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed my process and my story. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and hit that bell if you'd like to get notifications. Thanks again, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye!